Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Nittany Lion Sports Report. It's live here on Bob Long Sports. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, and yes, we join you for the first time in program history on Zoom. Such a COVID world we live in here, but in some ways the technology is great. I'm actually up in Penn State country, the heart of Penn State country, Altoona, Pennsylvania, about a half an hour from State College, up here with my wife and her family for Thanksgiving. So we're happy to still be able to bring the show to you. And Tyler, welcome you as well. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, good to see you, Bob. Even though this, we're not in person, it's our first ever virtual show. We'll still be bringing it, telling it like it is. Another disappointing loss as I look at some of the highlights here late that are playing on my computer. Another disappointing loss, 0-5. And, the nightmare continues for the Nittany Lions.
So we talked about it a little bit off air, and I've been teasing this idea, but the show to me and the real theme tonight comes down to the two Qs, Tyler, and those two Qs are quarterback and quitting. And yes, that Q word, quitting, that really is, I think, a nail in the coffin and quite the indictment. And I realize that when I say it. But you have a defense that is not schematically aligned. They're not communicating. But most importantly, Tyler, I do see at times a lack of effort out there on the field. That's obviously the larger of the two problems because you can certainly work on quarterback issues. You can recruit better over time. Obviously, this locker room will turn over in time as well. But when you start to use that Q word, quit, and I've been really hesitant to use it all year, although others have. Saturday was a time where I saw and really felt that the effort was not where it needed to be. And there was one team on the field that wanted it a heck of a lot more than Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, the first cue to touch on that, the quarterback play, obviously Will Levis got the start. He provided a spark in the second half of the Nebraska game the prior week. Many people thought, it might translate over, carry over into the Iowa game. He actually looked okay in the first half. He only had 2 incompletions. Really didn't take any shots downfield. They kept it simple for him. He made some nice throws, but really what he looked like out there was a wildcat quarterback. They were just running the ball, and I'm watching that and I'm thinking, there's no way, even if they want him to be the starter long-term, that he's going to stay healthy. I mean, he runs the ball like a running back, but he is your quarterback. You can't have your quarterback running the ball like that. He then struggled a little bit in the second half, and obviously Sean Clifford came in and went 2 for 2 with 2 touchdown passes, and then you blink, and it's all of a sudden somewhat of a ball game. It kind of reminded me of Clifford coming in the Citrus Bowl 2 years ago against Kentucky when McSorley got hurt for a play or two, and he came in and threw a nice 70-yard bomb, kind of sparked the offense for a little bit. But it's almost like he's better coming in off the bench ice cold than he is a starter. But they're still going to have a quarterback problem. Nothing has been solved. I don't know. I doubt we're going to see anything solved this year. We obviously haven't seen progression. If anything, we've seen regression. And then you bring up the second cue, which is quitting. It doesn't seem like this team really cares enough. And I don't know if I can blame them being in the situation that they're in, but I can blame the coaches because I'm not saying the coaches have quit, but there's just really the whole season, no sense of urgency. The leadership from the team and the coaches the lack thereof is very noticeable. And, it's the same things week in and week out. And, the defense, it seems like they're not put in position to succeed. You have the offense just with crazy bad play calls. It's not even – some of it's execution, but some of it's just like, this isn't what we thought we were getting with Kirk Ciarrocca. I mean, 4th and 2 at midfield in the first half, and you're throwing – a fade to Dotson down the sideline. I mean, just low percentage things that are going on and play calls that, it's not all execution. Usually it's a good mix, but to me, it's more play calling in the position that these guys are being put in on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about that play call and that specific sequence. 3rd down and about 1, and the whole world knows that you're running the inside zone read, where you have the tight end come in motion and kind of chop at that outside defensive end. But again, that's something where you have a good enough front 4, front 7. Really, if you're Iowa, if your opponent has that type of quality on the defensive line, you have to throw something else at them. So that's a play call where it was entirely telegraphed. And then the one time you go outside the box, it's a low percentage throw. And I get it, right? The thought is, hey, listen, Bob, if you're going to criticize them for not being aggressive enough, then don't criticize them when they're aggressive. But there's just – if you had told me that you were going to run those 2 plays in any order on 3rd down and 4th down before it happened –
flip them.
We would – well, sure, flip them for one. And probably if you don't run that fade route, because you have a quarterback in Will Levis. You just talked about how many underneath throws he had and how he only had 2 incompletions in the first half. And the reason is because those throws were high percentage. That was the lowest percentage throw he made all day long. And to do that on 4th and 1 is inexcusable because that was the only read that he had. It's not like he got to his second progression and said, oh, I have to just throw this up. It wasn't really a pressure situation. It was drop back 3-4 steps and let it go for a fade route to a guy who, yes, has been able to go up and get the football, but just not a good play call whatsoever.
No. And you got to factor in, too, where you are on the field at that time. And that's the thing is, like, it's like the same movie over and over again. And you saw it against Ohio State going for it early in the game, you know, and you, right off the – and you didn't get it. And then they get down and score again, and you're in a 14-0 hole in the first quarter. There's only so much fighting back you can do. I mean, Penn State, even on Saturday when they got the 7-3 lead, it was going like that.
Right.
They've had the lead for – like we talked about this a little bit last show, like maybe, I don't know, 15 or so minutes, a quarter of football total all year, it feels like. And, yeah, it's just it's the same thing over and over again, and I'm not expecting to see anything change this year, unfortunately.
No, I mean, there's only 3 football games left in the regular season plus 1, which might just be the toilet bowl. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about Michigan here tonight as well. But you're right. How and when is this going to turn around for this team, if at all? And we talked a little bit last week about coaching. I think it's worthwhile to bring up because the tabloids continue to bring it up and it's becoming more and more of a conversation. You know that I've long fought, hey, listen, you're not going to fire a guy after 1 year, or at least you shouldn't. And the general trend across sports is just that I think guys get canned too early, too often, don't give an opportunity for a natural lull that you're going to see. And the longer you stick with guys, the better situations you allow your program or franchise to be in. However, all that being said, to see 3 straight, let's call them blowout losses. And I know that Nebraska got tight in the second half, but that had the makings of a blowout in the first half. 3 straight blowouts to entirely and categorically mediocre teams.
At best.
At best. And who knows what's going to happen the rest of the way. That can expedite a thought process and a track for something like this, for whether it is Brent Pry and maybe Kirk Shiraka being a one and done. Again, tough for me to see something with Franklin after 1 year. But this is a type of season that where you'd otherwise say, you know what, if you go 5-4 in a shortened COVID year, even 4-5, and you just pick up the pieces and try it again next year, you probably don't move on. But if you go 1-7 or 0-8 and then lose your +1 game, and you're losing those games by 3 and 4 touchdowns like we're seeing, that can absolutely expedite the track for something like that. And you hate to see it because there has been a lot of growth here, Tyler, in Franklin's 7 years with this program. There's absolutely no doubt. Took them out of sanctions, brought them to a situation where they were, again, categorically Ohio State's toughest test every single year, the second best team in the Big Ten, and a definitive top 10 team on the edge of the college football playoff, seemingly every year of the last 3 or 4. from that to where this program is right now, is that a blip? Is that something where the administration would otherwise need to consider moving on? It's the first time where I have realistically addressed the question. And I'm surprised that I'm doing it after 5 games. I'm surprised that I'm here.
Right.
Because I'm not to say a contrarian, but in this specific issue, I've been a lot more lenient, and I think I've been a lot more conservative in that type of thought process
Mhm.
than the majority of the fan base.
So I think obviously it's becoming more each week. It feels like it's building momentum for sure. And I still am not 100% sure. Actually, I'm very sure that they would not fire James Franklin after
Agreed.
this season. If he comes back and it's the same song and dance next year, or 4-8, a 5-7, something that's just not up to standard, then I think you're having a different conversation. It feels like this year is going to be used, and I've used the term 1,000 times, a mulligan year. Now, James Franklin, I would not be surprised if he did resign. And I don't know how I would feel about that. Obviously, in the moment, it's the kind of thing, it's like, yeah, they need change. But you mentioned it. He brought them out of the sanctions right after Bill O'Brien. And this program has been, 3, 10, or 11 win seasons in the last 4. So this is just a weird year, new coaches, especially on offense, that you really weren't able to mold the clay like you normally would. No spring practice. And look, other teams are going through this too. But I don't know to the extent, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, new wide receivers coach. That's more than half of your offensive coaches. And, maybe Kirk Chiraka wasn't the right hire. And that's totally possible. I'd still like to see what he could do with a full off season to prepare. Obviously the quarterback is going to be an issue. What they do there, I don't know, but I'm really concerned about. Were you going to say something?
Well, here's my thought on that. Kirk Chiraka, was he a bad hire? It's possible that he was. It's also possible that it's too early. I would throw out there, Tyler, that I don't know that that's James Franklin's fault. We can talk about the day-to-day responsibilities, but would anybody have thought after Kirk Chiraka's line of success and what he was able to do at Minnesota, that was a poor hire? Would anybody have guessed that Penn State needed to move on? Even if Ricky Ronnie had not taken the job at Old Dominion, would anybody have said, you know what, let's keep Ricky on the staff and leave Kirk Chiraka out there at Minnesota? James Franklin went to bat for his assistants. He got Sandy Barber to open up the purse strings and give more money, more of a pouch for hiring big-name assistant coaches. He's been laying the groundwork for this hire, and I think he's done everything right in the build-up to it. It's just that the on-field product has not matched. And you know what? Sometimes that stuff just happens.
Yeah, it does happen. It doesn't feel like the bag of goods that we were being sold, what we were going to see on offense. And mind you that, they always said that, the offense that Ricky Ronnie was running and what Kirk Chiraka was going to be running, it wasn't that different.
Sure.
But, the word I kept hearing was simplified. Like Chiraka simplifies everything for the quarterbacks. They only really run a couple of different concepts. And honestly, what I've seen this year isn't even close to what I saw from Minnesota last year. Mind you, I didn't watch too much of Minnesota. Obviously, the Penn State game where Tanner Morgan had 2 incompletions. And, maybe Kirk Chiraka, he has a very good track record, but, and now, we're talking about other coaches. He was going up against Brett Pry, who we've seen Brent Pry's defense this year and in other big games kind of struggle throughout history a little bit. So
yeah. So I've been more of a Brent Pry guy, but I agree that the last year and a half of football has not been ideal whatsoever. On the Kirk Chiraka side, you talked about simplifying. You're absolutely right. It is a fairly simple offense. There's 5 or 6 iterations, and then they run a bunch of wrinkles on it. We actually did our blitz segment on that, if you remember, Tyler, the very first show.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a little bit more of a positive light than I'm talking
Yeah,
about
right.
it right now. But, at the end of the day, when you talked about simplifying, Sean Clifford doesn't look any less confused or any more comfortable in that offense. The only folks that seem less confused and more comfortable are the opposing defenses at this point, unfortunately, right? If you're building in these couple of base looks and the defense can fire away and game plan against those. And here's another big difference, Tyler. Minnesota had wide receivers that could, 1, create separation, 2, be physical, and 3, go up and get the football. And Penn State has one of those guys right now at the wide receiver position, plus a tight end in Pat Freiermuth. But you combine that.
Well, not anymore. He's out for the season. But yeah,
and you're right, of course. Yeah. And the difference in that situation is a deeper receiver core. You're right. Those receivers weren't out for the year the way we found Pat Freiermuth was as of this past weekend. And a quarterback that was more adept at getting the ball out quickly, making a couple of reads, and making the right decisions. That's the difference as far as I'm concerned.
It definitely is. And I really wonder if, Journey Brown didn't have the unfortunate career-ending heart issues. I mean, obviously, thank God that they found that before something really bad happened. Noah Cain doesn't get hurt on third play of the game, and we have the Brown-Cain 1-2 punch that we thought we were having. I wonder how much different the offense looks. I mean, the offensive line hasn't looked great. They've been a pretty big disappointment for me in the run game. But I wonder. I wonder if some of it's also the younger running backs not hitting the right hole. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it that we don't see.
Yeah.
In the film like the coaches see. But, all I heard all off season was the offensive line, they're going to be, they're going to love blocking in this offense. It's downhill running, and that's kind of why they brought Troutwine in. I mean, it was supposed to be a great combination, and maybe it still will be, but, and now Devin Ford's hurt too. So now you're on running back 4 and 5. At least that's how you ended the Iowa game.
Sure.
So, and they're 2 freshmen, which, they have good talent, but they're still young. So it's like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And I don't know. I mean, I thought we would see improvement from week to week. And I think Penn State's averaging 7 points in the first half through 5 games. They're down. I think they've been down double digits in all of those games at half. And I mean, and then you factor in the turnovers. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, and that's what you're getting.
It is. It's interesting you bring up the running back position because clearly that's been the position most depleted by injury this year here at Penn State. If you remember, we had a conversation right at the tail end of last year, maybe the last show of last year's podcast. And we basically said, not knowing the fate of Ricky Slade at that point, and whether he was going to enter the transfer portal, that next year you could have 6 4- and 5-star running backs in that room, and basically wondering how Kevon Lee and Keziah Holmes would actually see a snap next year.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Ricky Slade moves on to Old Dominion. I think that was the right move for him. But then the domino effect of Journey Brown, who was your stud, was going to be an all Big Ten type running back, maybe the best back in the Big Ten. And then these 2 now sophomore studs, especially Noah Cain and Devin Ford, who was more the changeup guy who you saw flashes from last year. But Noah Cain, your stud, out the first game, and now Devin Ford getting injured at the tail end of last game. All of a sudden, all you have is Keziah Holmes and Kevon Lee to try to mount a comeback in a Big Ten football game against Iowa.
Right.
How could you have possibly imagined that?
And the only good thing that's coming out of it is they're going to be getting reps for the rest of this year that, they'll have game experience going into next year. I mean, that is the one – and because they're going to be needed, big time next year. Noah Cain, I mean, the severity of his injury, they don't make that really public, but I wouldn't expect him – and I don't know what spring ball is going to be like, but I would expect him to have a limited role, if any, in spring, just because they know what they're getting with him and kind of take it easy. So these guys are – I mean, they've been thrown into the fire, and, lucky for them, I guess you could say there's not really much pressure given the circumstances of the season. But, they're going to have to pull their weight now because I don't know what Ford's status is. But I like these two backs. I do. But I have to see more out of them. And honestly, for them, they're arguably playing for the second spot in the depth chart for next year, because I think they could overtake Ford. And Kane should be the starter if he comes back healthy.
Two quick things to hit, and then we'll obviously get to anything you want to talk about as well before we get to our guest picker for the evening, which is going to be Grant Opalisky, Coastal Carolina Chanticleers fan, who gave us a nice shout out. So we figured great time to bring Grant on here tonight. But two quick things. First, at the quarterback position, then we're going to talk about the linebackers. And when we get back to our fancy whiteboard and get back in person, we're going to take a look at what the linebackers are struggling. Although, who knows, Tyler? Maybe by the next time we're doing this, the linebackers have a tremendous football game and we're lauding their play. But until then, consider me, surprised if that were to happen. But let's start with the quarterback, right? In some ways, Will Levis was the spark. And we talked about this at length, and hate to say it, got this one right, as I think a lot of the other media folks were on board with. He gave you a spark against Nebraska in the second half. Levis did. There was really no reason for Scott Frost and that Nebraska team to prepare for Will Levis. Reminds me of the second half of that Ohio State game. A one-trick pony, but Will Levis does the things that he does well. He does them well, and if you're not ready for him, he can kind of catch you by surprise. That final game last year against Rutgers was atrocious. This was more of the same, except against a slightly better football team. And so here's the problem if you're Penn State. At least if nothing else, there was this silver bullet. Nobody thought it was going to be the full answer, but at least you had some bullet left in your holster, and that was Will Levis. Now, Tyler, and with Sean Clifford having to come back in that game and his momentary heroics turning back into the normal Sean Clifford, terrible decision-making, bad execution, you got nothing. You have absolutely nothing left at the quarterback position unless by some we'll call it miracle, things change at the quarterback position, specifically with Sean Clifford's performance, or unless there's some true freshman that comes out and shocks the world. But by their lack of confidence to go that route, there's no reason for anyone to believe that there's anything there right now that's college football ready.
They have a pretty good freshman coming in, Christian Veilleux. He's not ready. He'll redshirt, I would assume. It could be, 2 or 3 years before he even, battles really for a job. It takes time to develop most of these kids, unless you're a 5-star, which unfortunately for Penn State, they're just not coming to Penn State. They're going to Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma. It seems like it's the same schools every time. Clemson, of course. But I believe that they will search the transfer portal for a quarterback, and they kind of have to,
100%.
Because it's such a glaring weakness right now that they would be stupid not to at least try it. I'm not saying they're going to land somebody, and I'm not saying they're going to land a stud, but in my opinion, you have to see what's out there, and because I just don't think it's in the quarterback room right now for where this program wants to go. I mean, if they want to be 8-4 every year, then yeah, you might have your guy there. Obviously not looking like it this year, but we'll draw this one up as just a weird year and nothing went right. But if they want to get where they have to go, I mean, Franklin, assuming he's there, he's going to have to make some tough decisions. I mean, you have Sean Clifford's little brother, Liam, coming in next year as a wide receiver. And they were looking forward to playing with each other at the college level. Then I'm sure they still can, and it could still be at Penn State, but it's not. You
not the Cinderella story anymore.
Right? It's not. Yeah, it's you really have to go out there and target somebody, and I don't know who that is. I don't know if it's Tanner Morgan. I mean, people have mentioned like that he hasn't been playing that great with Minnesota this year, and why not reunite with Kirk Ciarrocca at Penn State and try to get his draft stock up more for one more year? And it's not a bad option at all. I would certainly take it. But there's going to be options out there, but they're going to have to definitely look at it. And if it's going to ruffle some feathers and make people uncomfortable, if that's what you have to do sometimes to be to where you want to be. So
agreed. And that, I think, leads to the second part, which we're going to talk about the linebackers, but the defense as a whole, right? So if you had a competent quarterback, a quarterback that didn't throw 2 interceptions against Indiana, let's say, and they won that football game, and they lost in the manner that they did against Ohio State, I truly wonder whether this team would be 4-1 right now. And I mean that with all seriousness, and I also do not mean that, Tyler, as in any way some sort of excuse, cop-out, or justification about this particular team. But the reason I say that is if you have a quarterback that wins that Indiana game and just generally engenders more confidence, less turnovers, less bad decisions, more decisive progressions, I wonder if the defense is playing differently right now. We can talk about scheme. We can talk about some of the players that have struggled. But it comes back to that second cue that I talked about, which was quitting. And I do wonder if in some respect, I know that's a harsh word, if the defense is given less than 100% effort or if they're less than 100% committed to this season in the way they would be if they were 5-0 right now and staring a college football playoff berth in the face. And that's, again, not taking a shot at any of these kids. It's just human nature. And I wonder if this team could and would be playing better if the quarterback position was different. So let's get to the specifics and the mechanics, though, defensively. The linebacker position. We thought this was going to be a strength. Yes, the best linebacker in college football opted out for the year. There he is. 11 in your scorebooks, number 1 in your hearts, Micah Parsons. But we felt confident at the beginning of the year about Ellis Brooks playing the middle linebacker position. Thought he was a good signal caller and a good leader, though maybe not the most athletic. We felt really good about Jesse Luketa, his ability to slide inside, but also his aggressiveness and his athletic ability on the outside. And then Brandon Smith, we just thought, hey, raw but super athletic and has to just get more into the flow of things. I would say with Brandon Smith, we're still in that situation. Still super athletic, still a little raw, still needs to get into the flow of things and still needs to cover a little bit better. But what I have seen consistently, Tyler, is anything that gets a ball, the football in the hands of a running back, either off tackle or screen in the flat or a quick wide receiver screen, we have seen a lot of trouble outside of those hash marks with these linebackers. 2 plays come to mind, although there's a lot more that we can talk about. You know, the first is Jesse Luketa, the play that everybody's talking about where he just got juked out of his shoes. And that's okay, right? You're going to get juked out of your shoes at times. You're running full speed against equally athletic guys on the other side of the football, and they know where they're going. You don't know where they're going. However, his mistake, Tyler, was angling to the outside and giving him that room on the edge. And that's just a microcosm, I think, of what we've seen in the linebacking core this year, an inability to maneuver and push guys back to the center of the field where you have the help. The other one was a running play to the other side. Brandon Smith, same idea, just got caught flat-footed on a play where he absolutely could have and should have stayed in his gap, stayed in his assignment, forced the runner back to the center of the field where either Shaka Toney, Jason Away on the outside or Ellis Brooks, your middle linebacker, or even your strong safety could have come up and made the play. But instead, like we've seen all year, a real struggle to control the outside, cover the flat, and it's been a start and finish with the linebackers, I think, that has allowed that gap, which has given opponents so much success this year. Back to Ohio State, a couple of very similar plays across the middle that led to
the jet
opening.
sweeps.
Yep.
I mean, Ohio State and Nebraska.
Yep.
Both had huge gains. Nebraska's going for a touchdown jet sweep. Yeah, the angles have been terrible. The tackling's been terrible. Matt Millen even said during the broadcast, it's the worst tackling he's seen from a Penn State team in his life. And he's been around football, and he specifically Penn State football. But
sure.
And another thing, and I'm not making an excuse because I don't really believe in this excuse, but they haven't been practicing tackling like they normally do. It's been, obviously a different type of season. But, I mean, other teams have the same thing, and they're making tackles. So, I don't know. It's almost like, I wonder if Micah Parsons was playing, would a lot of these errors be harder to see because he could make up for that? I think that's a valid point.
I think the answer is yes, because we've seen that
Yeah.
before. He was that Brandon Smith. He was that raw linebacker that still needed to learn the position, played defensive end in high school, started or played a lot of minutes as a freshman, and then obviously he was a stud as a sophomore as well. But even to the bitter end, it's not like Micah Parsons was Jan Johnson, where he needed to be in the perfect spot every time to make a play, inhibited by his lack of athleticism related to the greater college football scene. Micah Parsons was good enough to make up for assignments that weren't hit 100% on the button. And the way he could close gaps makes it almost seem like he never was out of position in the first place. So I think it's a great point, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I also think, we touched on Brooks and Lucetta a little bit earlier. I think that, Brooks is limited. He's certainly just a middle linebacker. Lucetta is playing the weak side right now, and he's more of a middle linebacker too. And,
Agreed.
I think that they should do some shuffling. I would love to see, Curtis Jacobs and Lance Dixon out there a little bit more. You have Brandon Smith, Lance Dixon, and Curtis Jacobs, all former 5-stars and all sophomore eligibility or below. So you have young guys there. I mean, just see what they can do. Put them all in the field at the same time. Put Smith in the middle, and then put Jacobs at the Sam and Dixon at the Will, and see what you have, and just try it out. I mean, at this point, you have nothing to lose. Start seeing what you have for next year and years down the road. And that's, another concern of mine is there is a lot of talent on this team. And obviously that is obviously a good thing, but it's just like, it feels like the coaching staff just isn't getting a lot of this talent out of these guys yet. And a lot of it is young talent, so maybe they're not quite there yet, but outside of Ohio State, this is the second or third, most talented team on paper in the Big Ten, and they're the only team without a win in the Big Ten, so something's not adding up.
I think very clearly they're the second most talented team because of Michigan's drop-off in recent years in recruiting.
Right.
I guess you could throw Wisconsin, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think they do more with less up in Wisconsin. Absolutely the offensive line, Wisconsin recruits as well as anybody, and the defensive line, frankly, and the running back position. But quarterback, wide receivers, and secondary, I think leaves a lot to be desired relative to the caliber, the stars of players that Penn State's bringing in. Whether they're getting the right guys or the wrong guys, or they're just not developing the right guys, is to be determined, I think. But You're right, and that Penn State is very clearly, from a recruiting ranking standpoint, should be the second most talented team. Maybe is, and it's just not what we're seeing on the field. Certainly disappointing for Penn State football fans. We're here to, as media members, I guess, if you will, commiserate with you and walk you through what we're seeing, what's happening now. I know we have a couple games to pick here, and we can talk a little bit about Michigan on the other side. I see that Grant Opalisky has joined the chat. So we're going to take a 30-second break, come back on the other side, and make some picks with our guest picker this evening, proud fan of the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, Grant Opalisky. He's with us next here on the Nittany Lion Sports Report.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
Welcome back inside the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, and joining us here on our Zoom call is Grant Opalisky, guest picker for the evening, Coastal Carolina Chanticleer, big-time fan, and living in his glory right now. How about this year for your Chants here, Grant?
Oh, you know what? The game environment on Saturday was live. It was wholesome. There were families outside the stadium, and obviously the football on the field is grade A right now.
Yeah, man, that's a huge win over App State. Certainly not their best year, but if you're going to go and complete an undefeated season, that win's going to be a feather in your cap for a program like Coastal Carolina. It had to feel good.
I agree. And the game was back and forth. App State had a couple, chances to capitalize on some, mistakes by Coastal, but, they hung in there. The coaching staff was super energetic and they did a great job. So, glad we got the dub.
So you're following this team a lot closer, I would say, than probably Tyler or I. How good is this team? I mean, from your perspective, I'm sure you watch a good bit of college football, but are hyper-focused on your squad as well. How would this fare against a top 3 or 4 Big Ten team, the second best team in the SEC? How would that work, do you think?
You know what? Yeah, I think the coaching staff works extremely hard. I mean, you see them on the sidelines; they're super animated, and they get the most out of their players. So I think if this team had a full week to prepare for an upper echelon, Big 10, Big 12, SEC school, what I think the coaching staff would, they're in good hands with their staff, and I think they would hold their own. I would take them to cover.
I like take them to cover.
I would.
That's
you know
awesome.
what, we're talking about it now. It's very possible that we see a matchup like that down the road. I don't know what the bowl season's going to be like this year with COVID and travel and all that stuff. But, I hope we see them in a New Year's 6. And I'm looking at their schedule. I mean, they still have Liberty on here, which is a Hugh Freeze coach team. And Bob Long is probably one of the biggest Hugh Freeze fans I know. That's going to be a good game, and that's on the 5th of December. So that's not this weekend, but next. But I think that the Chants they're a very good team, well coached, which Grant mentioned. Grant, enjoy that while your coach is there, because South Carolina apparently likes him, and there's going to be some other teams that like him too.
Yeah.
Also, your quarterback Grayson Mccall. I've been watching him very closely because I think he could be hitting, and he could be hitting the transfer portal. And I would really like to see Penn State grab somebody like that, because he would certainly be a starter for Penn State, which is crazy to say because he's a starter for Coastal Carolina, but that's just where we are right now.
Yeah, and that would work well and mesh well with this podcast too. If we had the Coastal QB go up to Penn State, we might have to make this a weekly thing if that happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you, I remember I'm going back 10 years, and I think Coastal was like a new school or maybe just a new program. I think it was like they just got football, and Penn State played them at Beaver Stadium. Obviously, Penn State won that game, but I was impressed. Like I'll never forget the name, the Chanticleers, if I'm saying that right, and the colors. I mean, it and I know you're an alumni there. It seems like a really, really fun school in a really cool location.
Yeah, definitely. And it's known for its baseball program. 2016 College World Series champions. People around the area are always repping the baseball gear. And now it's really cool to have the football team, sort of ascending, because the stadiums are right next to each other. And it's just the atmosphere it's a cool atmosphere. And you can walk by and look into the stadium with the teal turf. You don't have to be in the crowd to even watch the game. So, they make it definitely fan friendly over here.
Well, and you're also now known, I talked about this last week, for a Masters champion, DJ.
Oh, yeah, seriously. The school is, it's on the rise, I guess.
That's right. That's great. Well, obviously fun to talk to you about football, but I know that your first love is the old hard stick in baseball. So let's talk some baseball here, Grant. You obviously knew, my brother very well growing up and played a lot of ball with Tyler as well for at least a period of time before he gave the sport up and decided to pursue lacrosse. But tell us a little bit about your baseball career, and then I want to hear about what's on your shirt. So how most people go to slow pitch softball, but let's talk some wiffleball at the end of this as well.
Yeah. Baseball wise, I'm sure your brother can attest to this. You can attest to this. Even Ty, I think we were kind of, we try every sport, and some you choose and some you stick to it. And for me, it was baseball. And, the best thing about baseball was you meet, tons of long-term friends. And I think that was the best part of, the young glory days of the baseball career. So, and now I transitioned to slow pitch softball, obviously, because that's, the organic, natural transition, but also, dabble with some wiffleball, man. I mean, these balls are still coming in hard. They're still dropping off the table. So, wiffle ball is a little bit more exhilarating than the slow pitch softball. So I'd highly advise anybody watching this program to, pick up the old golden stick and start swinging it around.
So I don't know if I'm okay to bring this up or not, but I can tell you that my brother still talks about it, obviously in a favorable light, but also out of a ton of respect for you. So state semifinal 2012, bases are loaded. It's a one-run game. Kevin's pitching, you're hitting. And this at bat, Grant, I'm calling the game, by the way. So we got the whole squad involved here.
I was in the stands with Bruno too, so we were there.
And this was probably to this day the greatest amateur, we'll say non-professional baseball at bat that I have ever seen. 3-2,
Really?
It felt like for an eternity. I mean, that was like a 12-pitch at bat. I think you fouled it off 5 or 6 times and ended up with a nice little poke to center field, and the center fielder had to come in. And fortunately for LaSalle, unfortunately for you guys, made a tremendous grab. But, longtime friends and being in that situation, I just remembered calling that game thinking it was a special at bat. And, again, hopefully I'm okay to bring it up. I wanted to get your thoughts on it, even coming out on the wrong side of it.
No, yeah, and I definitely cherish that moment as well. I remember Ty and his buddies in the stands yelling at us because obviously we were in the Wiffleball tournament the summer prior, so it was a cool scene. But yeah, Kev, I mean, Kev was always a hitter and a catcher growing up, and then he transitioned to pitching and just popped off. And I think he was state MVP that year. He had a tremendous year, and I still viewed him as Kev. I didn't view him as this top pitcher in the state. I won the battle. And that at bat was definitely one of the most cherishable moments of my career. And I remember, I just got it off the end. I think he threw me. I think he was just chucking me fastballs at that point. He wanted to get me either out of the box or something. But Ryan Otis made a great play coming in on the ball and snagged it with the bases loaded, which probably saved 2 or 3 runs. But that game was definitely one of the more legendary ones. And if you wanted to. If you're watching the show and you want to just read about that, there's a news article online still. You search, Grant Opalisky or Kevin Long. It'll come up. They interviewed us after the game. Definitely a really cool moment at a young age. And, it definitely sticks with me. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, it was a hell of a baseball team. And honestly, seeing pretty much every game that LaSalle played those were the 2 best teams in the state. That year that was a tougher test than the state final. And Grant, I mean, that game could have gone either way. That's how those teams were so equally matched.
If Kevin went to Hatboro-Horsham, Hatboro-Horsham I think wins the state that year because of another arm in the arsenal there for the Hatters.
Team public school, baby.
So let's talk. You talked a little bit about the wiffle ball. Tell me about the legendary backyard tournament. And then tell me about the travel element of it.
Yeah, I'll let Ty start out with the backyard tournament origins because
Sure. So the backyard tournament was started. We just finished our 13th year, so I'm not really that good at math, but I guess that puts us like 2008, somewhere 2008. And I was a freshman in high school, and we were just like, let's do a wiffle ball tournament. So it started off real small with like 2 teams of 4, and it was a best of 7. And each year we just grew and grew. And Kevin played in it for a couple of years until we were like, we can't hit this kid. Like, we can't even see the ball coming in. And eventually
didn't get an invite back, huh?
Yeah, well, I think he was busy playing like summer minors or something like that. But essentially now we have a really nice tournament. It's a 1 day in the summer. And now there's about 6 teams of 4 or 5. There's 2 fields, and it's an all-day event. It's, pretty much Hatboro-Horsham kids and then a couple of Eastern kids here and there from, friends of mine, and then some Ursinus kids as well, friends and teammates of my brother. And it's grown every year. We've told you about it. We would love you to come out next year if, we can make the date a date you're around, and we'd love you to see it, maybe announce it, film it, something, because it's really good. We'd love to promote it on a larger scale if we could. We have a ton of fun with it. Parents come over, the neighbors come over. It's on the Walking Horsham Power Line Trail is the outfields, and people will stop and take pictures and watch. It is actually a really cool event. Unfortunately, it's not like a fundraiser or anything. We simply play for fun and for the trophy and for bragging rights. But we enjoyed it so much this year that we decided to do with a couple of guys that are, good and take it seriously, a travel team. And that's where I'll let Grant tell you about our travel experience this year.
Yeah, so the travel team was fun. I think Ty orchestrated, the whole, looking up for the tournaments and stuff, was contacting people, found one in York, Pennsylvania called Mid-Atlantic Wiffleball, Twitter following, tons of players, big following. So we decided, give it a shot. We got up there. There's guys from Florida there winging the ball, probably, 90 plus. It's dropping off a table on us. I think we got 2 hits all day, but, we had a heck of a time. But yeah, it was a great time, and I didn't realize how big wiffle actually is. People run these leagues everywhere, and people are people there. They don't play slow pitch softball. They don't still play baseball. They drive up every week and they play wiffle ball. So seeing that atmosphere and the people being that passionate about wiffle ball made me think, hey, like this is pretty cool. So
yeah.
And in the jersey, these are the jerseys, the Whiffy Stiffies. A little play on words, fun play on words, Whiffy Stiffy, but I thought the banana logo was very appropriate. And this is actually the Savannah Bananas. That's the logo of this shirt. So hopefully they don't think we're stealing their logo.
What a fun story. That's great. And you know what? Sure, I'd love to come out next year. I can still swing the bat a little bit too.
I know you can. But it reminds me a little bit of what you do in your backyard with the golf. And I know you get really good footage and announcing on that. Either way, we'd love to have you there in some capacity. So it's a great event for sure.
We'll do it. That sounds great, Grant. Thanks for the story, Tyler, as well. And what do you say, boys? Make some picks here.
Yeah, we are going to jump to some picks. Give me 1 second here. I got to navigate back to the home screen. I gave Grant the list already, but I don't know how Benji did last week. I think he definitely had a couple losses in there, but I was looking at this week. I think Grant's schedule, the games we picked, is a little bit easier. There's not too many great games this weekend. Just a reminder, it's going to be 5 games, and then you can give the score if you want, Grant. Not necessary, but if you want to, that's great. And then we'll do the spread and score for Penn State. This week we have a couple of Friday matchups. Don't forget Thanksgiving on Thursday.
Oh my God, it's already Thanksgiving. Holy.
Yeah, that Friday. There's some good games on Friday. Starting at 12 o'clock on ABC, we have Iowa State in first place in the Big 12, traveling to Austin to take on the Longhorns.
He's saying hook 'em.
Listen, I have to stick with my roots. I grew up a Texas fan. I love the Longhorns. I love Vince Young. I love Colt McCoy. So Iowa State, you know what? They're in first place right now, like you said, but they're going to Austin. I think they're going to be riled up. Ellinger, he's hit or miss every week. I think he has a good game. Hook 'em horns, baby.
There you go. So you said Colt McCoy, Vince Young. Neither of those guys are in the NFL right now, but you know who is your boy Garrett Gilbert right now.
That's right. Yeah, Dallas Cowboys, right?
Yep. There you have it. I'm going to go Cyclones in this one. We'll say changing of the guard here in the Big 12, although it's still a long way to go. I think Iowa State could absolutely lose another game, but I'm going to take the Cyclones in a close one.
I'm looking at it here on the GameCast. They're giving Texas a pretty decent chance to win the game, and they're 2-point favorites. I don't know what Iowa State's kind of been hot lately. I'm going to go Texas as well. I think the Big 12 is going to get a little wilder, and Oklahoma's going to be right in it at the end again. And I'm going Texas this weekend.
Yeah, I think one thing's for certain, we can expect some points in this game.
I agree.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's jump to our next game. We have, again, another Friday special. Following that game, we have Notre Dame, number 2, traveling to Chapel Hill to take on number 25, North Carolina Tar Heels.
Yeah, and I think this might be the most exciting game on the slate. I love the way Ian Book's been playing this year, and North Carolina has some fun athletes, some NFL guys, Javonte Williams, Dynamite Brown, even Sam Howell. Some guys are looking at him. But I really think Notre Dame goes in there and wins. I think Notre Dame wins by 15 to 20 plus. North Carolina's given up some points in previous games. I think Ian Book. I like Ian Book, man. I think he could be a Heisman candidate this year and definitely one of the front runners right now.
Playing really well. Totally agree, Grant. The only concern I have is there's a couple linemen that are going to be out for Notre Dame. That was disclosed earlier this week.
The center is out for the rest of the season, and I think the rest of the season, but definitely this week. That's a big deal. I mean, your center is number 2 behind the quarterback and most important, in my opinion, on the offense.
Yeah. All that said, I still think Notre Dame finishes it off this week, takes care of business, sets up the eventual showdown between the Irish and the Tigers of Clemson again. I would say see who goes to the college football playoff, but if it's close, it could be both of them. A Clemson close win could be both of them in the college football playoff.
So I was a little surprised. This game, they're only giving North Carolina 4.5 points. This is a pretty close spread here. I think it's going to be very close down to the wire. I kind of think back to, I think it was last year when UNC almost upset Clemson at home, and they decided to go for the win, and it was a terrible play call, and it never really had a chance. I don't know. I think that the fact that Notre Dame loses their center for this game and one of their guards, North Carolina. I mean, Grant talked about Hal. I mean, he can sling the rock. I think North Carolina is going to upset Notre Dame this week. I'm not the biggest Irish fan. There's no secret there. That's Bob's second team now, so he has to pick them every week because he married into it. But
man, my wife's right upstairs. What can I do?
Yeah, and you're at the in-laws right now. But
that's right.
I think there's going to be an upset this weekend, a significant one that's going to shake up the playoff race, and that's where I'm going with it. Is North Carolina over Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think the key to this game is Notre Dame's defense, and I think Brian Kelly will motivate the guys. I like North Carolina's offense. I just don't know if the defense can hold off Ian Book. I think he's mobile enough. If he can get those snaps clean from that new center, I think he's gonna have a field day. I think he accumulates probably 4 touchdowns, three through the air, 1 on the ground. I like the Irish.
All right, so next we are going to go up to the Big Ten. We have Minnesota coming off of an emotional win over Purdue, and Wisconsin really laying an egg against Northwestern last week. Still ranked 18th, but Golden Gophers travel to Madison to take on the Badgers.
Yeah, and Wisconsin's one of those teams that every year I still find myself watching. I know they're old school. I know they run the ball, but I always find them fascinating to watch. They got the big O linemen. I like Wisconsin in this game. I think they're a more physical team. We're playing this game in Madison, so I'm going Badgers.
Wisconsin, I'm with you, Grant, pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin, when you come off a tough loss like that, and they're the better team than Minnesota. There's no joke. That's not, it's pretty obvious. So I'm going to go Wisconsin as well for the clean sweep. Now I'm trying to – all right, so I definitely have this game, and I can't remember the other game. But, okay. We'll go to the Iron – did I give you guys the Iron Bowl? Was that one of the games? All right, so Auburn 22 at Alabama 1. Crazy things happen in this game, and it's a pretty large spread. And I think I know where everyone's going to go with this, but the craziest things do happen in this game, and it always seems like a close game. And Auburn's playing okay football right now. Alabama's Alabama, but we'll throw that game at you. Auburn at Alabama.
Yeah, and I'll always tune into this game no matter the ranking of the teams. But, hey, you got to like the way how Bo Nix is playing right now, connecting with Seth Williams on the outside. I like the way Auburn's playing right now. I think they're going to make this a game, scoring with Alabama, but I don't think that defense is capable of stopping Mac Jones and them boys. I think Bama wins by a relatively closer score, maybe 10 to 13 points. They're not going to blow them out, but I like Bama.
Yeah, the spread right now is 24, so if you like that, jump on it.
Yeah, I think Auburn can score with them, but like I said, I don't think the defense is capable of stopping that powerhouse.
Yeah, Bama with relative ease here. Story for another show. We can dig in deeper. I don't think it's any dissent against Auburn. In fact, Tyler, I know you and really the greater national media thinks that Gus Malzahn has his head on a platter and is about to get axed, which he very well might. I think he's a better coach than people give him credit for. I think with the resources he has at Auburn and the division that he's been in, the fact that he's had the 2 or 3 years that he's had of really good success over his tenure is probably 2 or 3 more than I would have expected. Maybe the Auburn expectations are higher, but I don't know that they necessarily should be given the programs they have to go against year in, year out. But Bama comfortably this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going Bama as well, but I'm with Grant in the fact that I think it's going to be closer. Definitely, a I see it a 2-possession win for Alabama in the end. They just have too much firepower across the board. So Bama there, and then we're going to stay in the SEC here for our 5th game. We're going to go to the Egg Bowl. Two of the most interesting college coaches, Mike Leach going up against the Rebels and Lane Kiffin. Saturday, 4:00. So hit me with that pick.
I'm a big fan of both these coaches. Super animated, super fun to watch. Love the high-powered offenses. I'll tell you, I watched that Ole Miss-Alabama game earlier in the year this year, and I was super impressed with Ole Miss's offense. They stuck with Alabama. That was a close game. That was one of the better games I've watched all year.
48 points.
I'm going to roll with Lane Kiffin here. I'm a Lane Kiffin guy. I think he's fun. He worked under Saban, so he's learned something. I like rooting for Lane Kiffin just because it's fun, and I think the Rebels pull this out.
I agree, Grant. Lane Kiffin, a very strong offensive mind. I also agree you have to like Mike Leach, but Mike Leach is feast or famine. He is the most likable guy you can imagine when things are going well, really knows how to motivate his teams. When things aren't going well, I think he has a way of making things worse rather than better. This is not their year. I think Ole Miss wins comfortably.
Yeah, I like Ole Miss for a lot of reasons, really because I think Lane Kiffin's a very good coach. Games at home, they just have more talent than Mississippi State has. I do think it'll be an interesting game with a lot of points. If you're looking into the betting this weekend, definitely look at the over in that game. I think there's going to be a lot of up and down the field. It should be exciting to watch. It's always one of the most underrated rivalry games. Everybody talks about Michigan, Ohio State, Auburn, Alabama. During this week that is rivalry week, but this is one of the sneaky good matchups that doesn't get talked about enough. But the year, actually, remember a couple years ago, wasn't it like 1 versus 2 or something like that when Dak Prescott was there at Mississippi State?
Yeah. I remember that. Definitely. And actually, Benji Abercrombie was at this game last year because Jack was on the staff. So, if you want to know a little bit more about the rivalry, ask him because he was actually on the field last year for this game. So
like
Mississippi State. Yeah.
I think, Tyler, I think you might be getting that 1 versus 2 wrong. I know Dak was there and they were number 1. I think you're thinking of Alabama, Mississippi State that year. When that was 1-2.
I think Ole Miss maybe was like top 5 because I remember
Ole Miss had a year where
Robert
dropped out.
Kimdichie.
Yeah, and they were really – maybe it wasn't the 1-2. I know Mississippi State was up there, but Ole Miss was maybe up there and fell out. But it was like crazy because nobody really expected either team to be that high when they played.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to throw in a bonus. We'll go with 6 right here for a bonus just because we have a Coastal Carolina graduate on our hands. We're going to go Coastal Carolina at Texas State, 3:00, ESPN Plus. The Chants are 17-point favorites. Grant, let's hear your advice on this one and what you think's going to happen.
If that moves up to 17.5, don't take it because I took it a couple weeks ago and they won by 17. So that hook is tough. So I don't know about the hook. I like the Chants. I think the money line probably doesn't have much value on it because they're favored by so much. But if you can get that thing to like 2 touchdowns, tease it down, maybe I take it. But, yeah, I definitely think the Chants come out and they come out rolling because they can smell it now. They can see the finish line. I think that's going to motivate them to cap off the season well.
Chants big. I agree.
I like the Chants too. They just can't look ahead to the Liberty Flames. I'm actually really looking forward to that game the following week. I will certainly be tuned into that. Chants have it at home. Grant, any chance you go back down to that? Are you going to be still down there? You think you might go to that game?
Listen, if it's a big time game, I definitely will make it a priority, and I think the rest of the squad should too. So that's just my 2 cents.
All right, and finally, the big game of the week, we have 0-5 Penn State at 2-3 Michigan, where Michigan, as of right now, is a 2-point favorite. So give me your 12 o'clock ABC. So give me your thoughts on this game, Grant.
Yeah, 2 coaches that I think they lost their teams and they're going in different directions as coaches as well. I think Harbaugh's focused on, going back to the NFL maybe right now. And I think James Franklin should be, considered being a used car salesman in the near future because this guy cannot get these boys motivated. But I think Penn State wants to play harder for their coach than Michigan does for their coach. I'm going with the Nittany Lions in the big house.
There you go. Outright, Nittany Lions. I am going to take the Michigan Wolverines this weekend. No heart at the moment, defensive liabilities, and Michigan's got at least some semblance of an answer at a quarterback position. Penn State does not. I hate to say it, Ty. I'm sorry, man, but I got Michigan this weekend. Let's call it 31-20.
I am going to go with Michigan as well. Part really because I'm 1 for 4 on picking Penn State this year. I had the Ohio State game right, and everything else has been wrong. The Maryland, I'm like, there's no way they lose that, and then Nebraska, there's no way they lose that, and then Iowa. Actually, from a betting perspective, Penn State was the underdogs until like the day of. The line jumped to Penn State being favored, and I'm like, wow, I kind of like my Penn State pick now. I thought, Will Levis coming in and that spark would carry over a little bit more and a little bit better than it did for the game on Saturday. But, Penn State, whether it's a packed big house or an empty big house, they just, don't play well at Michigan. Grant made mention that it's like these 2 coaches, like it feels like that they're not getting anything out of their team right now. Interesting point. He thinks that, Penn State players are going to play harder, which they may. I don't see how this team wins this game. Not that Michigan obviously is that great this year, but hopefully I'm wrong, and we can, look forward to the Rutgers game next week, but I just don't see it in the cards. I'll say like Michigan, probably 27-21, something like that.
Yeah, I think if Penn State is going to win this game, it's going to be one of those games where we get in the mid-30s, maybe hit overtime, and they catch a break in overtime. I think it might be one of those offensive shootout games. I just think both coaches, they're going to put everything on the table. We're going to see fake punts. We're going to see trick plays. I think this is going to be one of those games that could be just one of those fun shootouts that you hope, Penn State gets a turnover or something in overtime and wins it. So that's where I'm looking right now.
Not counting on Penn State catching a break in overtime if week 1 is any indication.
Also, great. You're not going to go as far as saying that it's James Franklin's biggest game at Penn State since the Rose Bowl against USC, are you?
Oh, no, it definitely is. I think he's coaching for his job. This is his biggest game of his career right now.
2 weeks in a row, Ty.
Bill O'Brien is sitting there unemployed right now. They're saying, hey, James, you know what? We can bring back B.O.B., maybe get Hackenberg as the quarterback's coach. This is his biggest game of his career.
On that note, that's phenomenal. I love it. Thank you so much, Grant, for coming on. Really an entertaining segment here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Go Chants.
Go Chants. That's right.
The claw.
Tyler, Thanks as always, man. Great show. We did it via Zoom and wasn't a total disaster. So that was great. But we'll be back in person next week.
Yep, technology is great. Hopefully, everybody out there has a great Thanksgiving. And don't forget, lots of football on this weekend. College football is on Friday and Saturday, so you get a little double dip this weekend. So enjoy it. Enjoy the time with your families, and hopefully we're talking about that first Penn State victory on next week. Obviously, Bob and I don't think that'll happen, but we'll see.